Well, good morning and welcome to Doppler's Gear Garage. In case we haven't met, my name is Doug and this is my Gear Garage. And in any case, we're going to be have a very interesting show for you today. First of all, let me make sure I've got my comments up and open. What's going on, Digital Viper Media? How you doing? Good morning to you. Hello. There we go. Hello. First, there we go. Come on. I guess if I replied here, hang on a second. I guess that's going to make me fourth. There we go. At least in the comments there. All right, first of all, hey, Chris, you made it. Great to see you, my friend. John Mello, hello, hello, hello. Happy Saturday. I missed the Kramer I had in the early 90s, Duncan Screaming Demon Humbucker and all. So this is some sort of Duncan. I think it's like a custom. No, excuse me, it's like a JB, or it may actually be a JB. Los Car, what's going on, my man? How are you? Good morning, good morning, good morning. Boy, I guess I better raise the bar here. In case Carlos is a dear friend, great guitar player, and fellow Bay Area Contra Costa County dude. Albert, good morning. Thanks for the kind words on the video, by the way. Much appreciated. Okay, well, we got a couple of things that we're going to do today. First of all, hello, Jim. Great to see you. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Okay, so true to the Doppler's Gear Garage thing, we should be talking about gear. So I've got a couple of things that I want to talk about. Spend a little bit of time talking about tubes. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about strings. The short version is that this lovely Rev E Mesa Boogie, you can either run EL34s or 6L6s. And the funny thing is that, you know, in my mind, the difference between the two was going to be much bigger than they actually were, going back and forth between them. But however, when you take your tubes in and out, once they've cooled down, a little bit of tape with a little bit of a Sharpie, I think you can see that says number 4 there, is a great way to make sure your tube goes back to from which it came. That's actually really important. Usually they come in pairs. And the idea, they're matched sets. So the idea is that you kind of, as they wear in and so on and so forth, you keep those matched pairs together. The interesting thing about a 6L6, very briefly, we'll go down the rabbit trail here, is if you think about the higher powered Fender amplifiers, like a Twin Reverb. You know, Twin Reverb was really designed to be stupid loud in an era when PAs weren't big and huge. So that's one of the reasons, if you take a look at Woodstock, I was actually looking at a photo. I was kind of down this rabbit trail, checking out some history on Janis Joplin, interestingly enough. And there's a photo for kind of at Woodstock, and there's a back line. At least I'm 90% positive it was at Woodstock. There's a back line of all these Twin Reverbs there. I'm kind of like, yeah, because they were just stupidly loud. So the thing is that it's a higher powered tube. And in, kind of building these amps, they were designed around the 6L6. However, the idea of being able to tighten things up with a tube that, in theory, has a little bit less low end, but not just less low end, but a little bit tighter in the bottom end. But the funny thing is kind of switching, pulling those out and going back to the 6L6s. I really expected there to be a much more dramatic difference than there was in my mind, which was really interesting. So that said, and let me just get caught up on the comments here real quick. Good morning, Griffin. Great to see you. Hello, hello, hello. So great question about biasing the amp. So this is the crazy thing about these Mesa Boogies. So long as you remember to flip the bias switch, they basically are quote-unquote self-biased. So that is to say, when you switch from your 6L6s to your EL34s or back and forth, there's just a little switch, and you do not have to bias these. Most amplifiers, you do need to bias, and it's something that is actually not in my skill set. Fortunately, these are smarter than I am in that area. And, I will go so far as to say this. This particular amp has the 440s. I think it's an STR 440. These are the original tubes that came with this amplifier, and they are stupidly rare now in playing condition. And so there's a whole world of Tweakerville about tubes and the nuance that they make. Will the person in the fifth row be able to hear the difference? Never. Will we feel the difference? Yeah, there is some difference as you do that, but with all these controls here, the thing that I'm continuously reminded of is as I kind of switch guitars and do stuff, like just a little bit of EQ seems to kind of eradicate the differences between instruments and things that we're going up against, and to a certain extent with the tubes. Here's the thing: is like if you go out and spend hundreds of dollars on a vintage tube set and then start playing it, then at a certain point, you get hooked on these old vintage tubes. And the next time you're going to replace them, hundreds of dollars more. I'm not saying not to do it. I'm not saying that I don't appreciate this, but and to tell you the truth, the Holy Grail tubes that are in there and the kind of brand new Mesa Boogie tubes that are EL34s, I was like, still sounds like the amp. So that's my take on it. And there is an amp here that I bought. It's a Triple Crown 50. Hang on, let me see if I can wheel something into the screen here without breaking anything. No, hold on. Let me just take a look here real quick. Can I get you over here without breaking anything? No, I can't. All right. I've got an amp on top of all that stuff. So the Triple Crown, I found one. I think my buddy Albert told me about it, or like some of my Bay Area boogie friends. We all see this stuff on Craigslist, and we're like, So I made a trip over and I bought the Triple Crown. It turns out it was for my buddy Tal, and it had some kind of special kind of German tubes in it. And honestly, I plugged into the amp and I'm like, this is magic. I don't want to change anything. So there's a certain amount you go, okay, the tube is part of the magic. However, literally, was thinking about this earlier. I have a very unique relationship. I've been doing this a long time, so I'm very grateful that I have a level of trust and relationship with the good people at Mesa Boogie and Gibson. So I went up there recently, and they literally had a bag of tubes for me, including a sextet of EL34s, such that I could drop them into the various triple recs, which are 150 watts. So they take 6 6L6s or 6 EL34s. But the point being is that in the process of kind of going, well, do I really notice a difference between a new EL34 and an old 6L6? Not so much that I'm going to go out and spend hundreds of dollars for it. And, that said, I spent an extra $100 on that amp to get, and the guy was really smart about it. He left the tubes in there. He's like, well, these are the blah, blah, blahs. And I was like, and I plugged in, I was like, it was just magic. I was like, just leave it, So, all right. Okay. Let me get further caught up here. All right. Oh, okay. Good morning, Eric. I almost mailed your package. Gosh darn it. And by the way, I absolutely love the community dimension of what happens here and the people saying hello. It warms hearts. So thank you for just being you. White Eye, what's going on? 420. Dougie Fresh, what's happening? I'm feeling when we get around to some of the playing stuff. We're talking a little bit about chording. I might even pick up the bass, but that's to be continued. In any case, that's what's going on. All right. All right. So that gets us off the tube subject. But, there's, and I'm not seeing any more comments about tubes, so we're going to march on here. So something that happened so the expected and the unexpected. I expected a dramatic difference when I changed tubes. Wasn't as dramatic as I thought it was going to be. Really shocking. This is the set that goes on that guitar right there. And originally these were 10 through 52 Zakk Wyldes. So I am, again, and I was really sensitive about how I was going to say that. I'm so grateful and thankful. I've worked for a lot of decades playing and developing relationships with companies. So when I say that I've got a relationship with Dunlop, I don't go, oh, I've got a relationship with Dunlop. I just, first of all, I hate it when people are like, I'm just like, shut up, go away. But the idea is that I want to say that thankfully because of that relationship, I recently sent them an order for 10, maybe 15 different sets of strings and boxes because I wanted to have the opportunity to cycle through different sets of strings on different instruments. What happened that completely blew my mind, because if you think about going from a 1052 to a 1056 and within the Zakk Wylde signature string sets, that guitar, the moment I sat down with it, I keep it tuned to C sharp unless I drop it down to quote unquote drop B. It was a different instrument, sounded 10 times better. Everything about it. The rhythm notes, and because it's a heavier string, you can dig in a little bit more when you're playing rhythm without it going sharp. And when you tune down, a traditional Gibson scale instrument, I guess it's over there, you have to be really careful about not hitting the bottom strings to it. You got to be careful of that all the time. So the idea of being able to just put a set of strings on there and everything about the guitar, like it came into focus. And I just could not believe after all these years, and I had one similar experience years ago. There was a Les Paul that was on loan here. And I broke a string, so I changed the string set. And the amp sounded, that I was playing through, was a Metropolis amp, sounded completely different. I ended up messaging the Metropolis folks, and I was like, something happened to the amp. And they were like, well, did anything change? And they were like, well, I changed strings. And they were like, dummy, And so there's a thing that I basically call magnetic potential. So if you think about a nylon string on your electric guitar, it's not going to make any sound coming through these transducers. Here's a minute if I forgot. My pickup there needs a little height adjustment. So the deal is that my very limited, and there are things that I know a lot about, and there are things like, if you ask me about the notes of E major or its relative modes at E, we can have a long conversation. In terms of electronics, I'm not super deep on that. But basically, the string vibrates. This is basically a glorified magnet, and that as the string moves across that magnetic field, that transduces its way into your guitar amp. That's a really ghetto way of describing what happens. So the greater magnetic potential of the string, that is to say, the more that string has the ability to mess with that magnetic field, a nylon string, not at all. The more magnetic potential of the string, the more it's going to interact and the more sound it's going to create. So the idea of the string magnetically is one thing, but the other thing is that when everything harmonically about the instrument changes, you just kind of go. So getting back to the Metropolis thing, the sound of the guitar was completely different because of the magnetic potential of the strings, not because the strings were old or new. That does make a difference, but not what I heard. And I was like, wow. That was really the first moment I was like, the strings that were on there and the strings that I put on there made the guitar behave differently, and it's not because of the acoustic potential of that. Plays a little bit of a role, but not that big a role. That is to say, if you think about what's happening electronically, in my opinion. But the deal is that switching to these strings. So why am I saying this? We are habitual people. I've been using the same guitar pick for, not the same one, but the same 1mm Tortex guitar picks for 40 plus years. So to a certain extent, I'm a creature of habit. Now, there are times, Albert commented about the piezo pickup demo that I did for the Subway Plus. There are times that I will pick up a pick that's a little bit lighter because I want a certain sort of sound when I'm hitting the strings. It's going to be a little bit different than the 1mm Tortex thing. The other thing is you'll hear me continuously raving about my quote-unquote internet buddy, Christian Kola, the guy that I'm learning all this great stuff about audio from via his courses. I've interacted with him, but like a little tiny bit, so he's not really my friend, or I'm not really his friend or something. But the point being is that the idea of the sound... I lost my train of thought. I started talking about Christian. Gone. It happens. Strings. Tone. All right. Okay, so let me keep checking in here. It's so funny. Okay, there's some folks that only text me during my live stream. This is like I just always kind of shake my head. It's kind of funny. All right, Eric, great to see you, my friend. Good morning. Completely lost my train of thought. Sorry. What's going on, Braden? Great to see you, my friend. Okay. Okay, there we go. For what it's worth, I do find I prefer the 6L6s in the Badlander over the ELO34s. They are denser and less fizzy. So this is an interesting thing. I have been uh, Shredward. What's going on? Okay, I guess Shredward's comment. Obviously, I need a little bit more caffeine because I lost my train of thought already. Uh, Wait, what? No. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. George was and is a brilliant amp designer and an exceptionally nice guy. Um, oh crap. All right. Pooh. All right. Well, it is that time. Let me know what it is that you're drinking and where it is that you're drinking it. I have a feeling Chris is drinking some sweet tea, but I've got Pete's and Muscle Milk here. And of course, like my cup says, but first coffee. Okay. Gosh. Christian Cola. No, gone. All right. Um, let me. Braden, I did not get a chance to listen to it yet, but I look forward to it. I saw something poked in. It's been a little busy, but I look forward to checking it out. So, yes. All right. So, Chris Alexander sent through some questions yesterday. Um, as always, because he is the bestest. So, one of the things that he touched on was IRs. And it was just kind of, it was asking, does the preamp use IRs, which it doesn't. But, one of the things that's been happening is I've been living with Cab Clone IR as my kind of... and I realize because we're bleeding through the mic here, it's not going to sound as kind of good as it does through the monitors here. So you're hearing both the sound kind of coming through my system and through the mic. And the room mic does not make pretty with the guitar sound, but as opposed to kind of muting the guitar or my mic every time I want to play, it's a little inconvenient. But as it relates to IRs, it's an interesting thing is that an IR is essentially, a virtual cabinet, if you will, a digitized cabinet. And I have a big collection of cabinets. I've got like 2412 cabinets, a little extreme. But each one of them kind of has its own character. And generally in boogie world, the oversized rectifier slant, none of which are visible in the back line there, is my de facto favorite cabinet. And the ability to take the essence of these cabinets, and why am I talking about IRs? So many of us live in the box that when we do whatever recording. By the way, I would love it if everybody would be so kind is if you would drop a little note in the chat saying, I do record actively. I don't record actively. Because one of the things that I was thinking about as I was thinking about you this morning was I was going, I really want to try and see if I can't get more of the people that aren't actively recording themselves, not necessarily for the idea of putting music out there, if that's not kind of your heartbeat, but the idea of being able to develop your rhythm, your arrangement skills, and all of these different things. And IRs play an integral part of being able to easily capture your amplifier at any volume and be able to work in that environment. So, in case, somebody out there is probably like, I kind of know what an IR is, but I don't. I'm coming out of the amplifier here, coming out of the speaker out. I'm going into this box, which is a Mesa Boogie Cab Clone IR. It is not the newest box on the market, but gosh darn it, I've been playing through this thing day and night pretty much for the past month. And I've been getting just, for me, some of the best tones I've ever gotten. I'm like, darn, it's good. The other thing that I do there, just for piss and giggles, and I've talked about this before, I keep an ISO cabinet. If I turn down this, you'll hear that's the cabinet that's isolated. So that's literally it's a 212 cabinet. It's from the good folks at Mojo Tone, but literally that's the amount of sound and volume escaping from that. So the amp is pushing some weight. But the deal is, rather than using a reactive load on the amplifier, which is a very viable way to do things, what I've got is I'm coming through that box and I've actively got a speaker load on there. What it means is the amp behaves just like it's seeing an actual speaker because it's seeing an actual speaker. So that means that when you run an IR, it behaves more like the amp is behaving when you got a cabinet connected, because there's a cabinet connected. I'm just kind of using that to get into the box. So the reason that I'm talking about this recording thing is that, first of all, I've been spending a lot of time double tracking and then also playing little melody and solo ideas over the top of it. And I've learned so much about myself as a musician. The idea of like playing the same thing the same way exactly twice in a row. Double tracking is a great nuance, and even for those of us that just want to be better rhythm guitar players, and like, hey, we don't want to I don't want to spend my life in a recording studio. What it does to develop your sure-footedness about what you're playing, and one of the most important things I've discovered, and I was thinking about this morning for you as well, is what I will do is I will loop a section, and I'll kind of wait until I've really got the feel. And I'm not a guy that I'm not one of the players that they pick up an instrument and they play the perfect part out of the gate. What I am a guy is that I will nuance and nurse a part along until it kind of feels and it becomes itself. That's a matter of hearing how the guitar responds to the amp, how things are happening in terms of the way you're kind of playing to the quote-unquote cabinet, and how that's singing against the whatever drum program or loop you're playing against. And then in turn, you kind of begin to kind of get seated in the right spot in the track. And then you find yourself actually, and it's one of the things, those of you that write songs, if you notice, when you first played a part, by the time you played it, especially if you play live, Braden, you'll be able to talk about this, you end up playing the part, it grows into something that's a little bit different than where it started. It just kind of develops some legs and kind of becomes itself. There's the initial idea, and then there's the thing that the part becomes. And that process happens by just playing it over and over. And sometimes you're not even conscious, like, oh, I'm playing it a little bit differently than I was, just looping each section. And then it allows you to kind of, where am I palm muting, where am I lifting up, all these little nuanced things that when you're double tracking and really, because I'm at the beginning of this thing, and I've actually coined the rectifier project, where I'm going to document all these the vintage and modern rectifiers, and Mesa Boogie rectifiers, that is. And so the double tracking is really important because there are a number of people that will potentially watch this who are really exceptionally gifted in that area. I'm really having to make sure I'm playing to the top of my game in that way. So it's really a matter of like, the time's got to be right. When the guitars expand, that is versus a mute versus a stab, the way the part opens and closes. When you're double tracking it, it needs to do it in sync, and it kind of needs to be as close to identical as is possible. And that takes time to finesse, and it's a process. But what ends up happening, separate from all of that, when you go to play rhythm, you just kind of start playing in a different way. And I can't stress how important that is to the process. Whiskey in the evening, coffee in the morning. I love that. There's a great song there. That was the singing part. Whiskey in the evening. Coffee in the morning. Thanks for that. That was kind of fun. And the other thing about recording your rhythms is you just kind of end up in a rhythmic space. And this is one of the other things that as we get into some of the guitar talk stuff today, I've been really thinking about the way I practice and or the ways that I don't practice. Probably like a number of you, I'm juggling a number of different kind of things that I play, and I kind of focus on this and then I focus on that. And the quote unquote wanderlust part of it is actually one of the great things about the guitar. However, being at the level, and I know you know what I'm talking about, being at the level of proficiency with all these different things is kind of nuts. And so there is some technical stuff that goes around all of this as well. So I want to spend some time talking about that a little bit as well. All right. No tea, but soon. I'm disappointed, my friend. All right. Any updates on the new album? So it's a funny thing. First of all, thank you for asking. New albums. So the vocal album and the instrumental album. So I have a strange... I don't think I can quite... So that is close, but I can probably get closest to it a little bit more gain. So that is close to what I call the cat piss tone. Now, what in the world is cat piss tone? Think about the face you make when you smell cat piss. That is... That's cat piss tone. So it's been a sound that's been in my head three-ish years of the process of making these albums. And so it's been something that I've been kind of trying to nurse along. And it was actually on the other channel of this amplifier, the orange channel in the vintage mode, with the EL34s, I will add, that I kind of got to a place with it. And because of the fact, I'm just playing through this Doppler reverb in the loop, which, by the way, sounds great. And again, you're hearing the room mic, which is going to kind of make everything that... It's going to make things sound not as good. But the point being is that I kind of stumbled across it with a little bit of short slapback, which I'm not using here. No, you can't see it. There's a Roland Space Echo, an RE150 that I bought 1981, let's say, at Leo's Music, those of you from the San Francisco Bay Area. I probably bought it from Nicholas Del Drago when he was working behind the counter there. And there is the RE201, which is arguably a much more popular unit that has one of the worst sounding reverbs ever. Still to this day, I listen to that reverb and I'm like, how could anybody possibly like that? I don't, personal taste. However, the number 2 selection of the rotary dial allows you to kind of get kind of my favorite delays out of the RE150. And I also knew that you can dial in a nice, really short, just a nice little slapback, and then add some extended reverb on top of that, and the two just kind of sit really well together. And as a foundation for the cat piss tone, You can get there. However, you add a little bit of swamp. And all of a sudden, the cat piss starts smelling a little stronger. So it's still got enough gain. If you need to dig in, you can do that. It's not necessarily a shreddy kind of a... Actually, if you gain it up a little bit, you can kind of but it starts to lose a little bit of... Really long answer. All that to say, I kind of need to get there, amongst other things. But in the process of doing all this, this is kind of my point about all the double tracking. It's really allowed me... There's a guy in Canada named Mike Fraser who has mixed and or produced Joe Satriani, AC/DC, Jimmy Page, Metallica. So he's the guy that's going to mix all the music. So when I hand off my guitar tracks to him, noting that he's mixed those guys, they've got to be the best that I can get, not just performance-wise, but sonically. Such that as he goes to push up the faders, he goes, I can do this. Not that he could, but the idea is like, I can do this without having to go in and just like, all right, I'm going to use that, and that to fix stuff. And that's kind of getting back to Christian Kola, tipping my hat. I've learned so much about kind of the sonic framework of things, is just being really conscious of what I'm listening for as I'm doing stuff. So it's been short answer, not short. Learning that thing, but the great thing about it, in the process of working with these amps and getting my double tracking much better and my dual guitars much better, and listening to all these different artists, I keep. By the way, I want to say, especially for those of you that are in the writing, and or those of you who maybe do gear demos, I have a playlist of stuff that I'm constantly adding musical ideas. So I'm kind of always fishing for new ideas that I can gently take inspiration from and drop into, and they kind of feed me. And so the idea is I come back and listen to these songs, I go, oh, I can do a thing there. And when I say do a thing there, arrangement-wise, you can do, was it Blackwater? What is that Doobie Brothers song? You know, where they kind of go into that little breakdown, and it's you know, it's taking a moment in a song where you're taking the listener, kind of taking them by the hand. You're going like, hey, let's go over here, rather than just like, hey, we're going from start to finish, and we're just going to kind of rock this thing through, creating those peaks and dynamics, and creating those little nuanced things that when you listen to the great albums of yesteryear, people took time to nurse things, because honestly, as opposed to just kind of layering parts, like, oh, we're going to layer this, they actually had to play together, and they had to learn to create stuff. Like if you listen to the Eagles or any of those bands, or early Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, what made the music so great was the music was great because they played like a band. And yes, bands go out and play, but there was, I'm getting a little chatty, but here we go. It's important for somebody, hopefully. At one of the guitar camps, Joe Satriani, a camp in Vegas a couple of years ago, he was talking about his recording and creative process, and realizing that sometimes you don't really realize that part way up at the top of the neck. While it was cool in the studio with all that stuff, when you're going out and playing it live, you're like, I'm kind of sticking out like a sore thumb. So he really kind of made me aware of, you want to be aware of the recording process and aware of what's going to happen when you take that out. That's kind of one of the reasons, where is that shot? Where are you? Where are you? There we go. Come on. That shot is from come on, come back. There we go. Was from a little micro tour that I did in the South along with Larry Mitchell. And that obviously is my buddy Chris. But it specifically per Mr. Satriani's instruction, I got a chance to go out and play those songs live and kind of go, oh, and it's like I was talking about, when you're looping a rhythm part, and all of a sudden you stop paying attention, you start playing it a little bit differently, and it becomes the part. The idea isn't necessarily the part. The idea is the impetus of what actually grows to this thing. And what ends up happening when you start playing these melodies live, you start doing things without thinking about what you're changing, and all of a sudden you go back and listen to the original recording. I'm like, I don't play it like that anymore. I go to this note a little earlier, a little bit later, or I add an extra note, or all these things that begin to happen. And so the process of workshopping a song, one of the other things we're going to talk about, and I'm going to get down here. Okay, first of all, thank you for that. We're going to fix that. I used to record decades ago. Thanks for sharing that. You're an 8. There we go. I actually record Lawful Love. What's going on, Brett? How are you, my man? West Digital Viper Club approves this stream. That's awesome. Come on. There we go. Bring it home. I'm trying to, but work gets in the way. Tell me about it. Actively, I use both mics, cabs, and IRs. There we go. Come on. You are a brave soul. Those guys play the perfect part the first time. Oh, awesome. Your streams have inspired me. I picked up a Blackstar Polar Go interface, which has built-in mics for vocals, XLR input, and the camera on my iPhone 17 to dip my toes in the streaming guitar content. Way to go. Congratulations. Made my day. Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Awesome. I have an original Marshall 6100 30th anniversary half stack, which I bought in 92. 87th made, which means retubed. What would Doug do? Has the booklet and all the engineer signatures, including Jim Marshall's. Would this be a collector's in your opinion? So, correct me if I'm wrong. Yours is purple. It's got the little push buttons on it. Well, I kind of those are. Let me not start fiddling with browsers. I know a buddy of mine's got one of those. Actually, he has one or two that were the ones that actually belonged to Joe Satriani. Really, really, really cool amplifier. So first of all, I think there's going to come a point that anything signed by Jim Marshall himself, other than something that where it says, his name on the inside of a 412 cabinet, where you actually, kind of got to take the back off the cabinet to see it, I think it's definitely going to be valuable, and more importantly, if the gear speaks to you. So the funny thing is that my buddy has a number of pieces of gear, some of which live here for the time being, that Joe has sold through Bananas at Large. And by the way, bananasatlarge.com. It's a good place to go and see whatever inventory they might have of Satriani gear that has, once Joe kind of is done with a piece of gear, he chucks it. I'm kind of not that guy, hence why I got 24 12s, including a pair over there that I don't think I've played through since the 90s. Did I really say that? Don't tell the wife. Shh. However, they are rear-loaded 90s Celestion Vintage 30s, and it's a great sounding cabinet. It's actually a Lee Jackson design cabinet for Rapco Horizon. Great sounding cabs. So at some point, when I'm not feeling like I've got other things to do, I'll probably plug those cabinets in and just kind of relive that. In addition to the rectifier project, I'm probably going to resurrect this Amps, Racks, and Rigs video series, because it allows me to pull in some of the stuff and being able to kind of go back to what was that rig. Ironically, he was using and there's been a, Jim, to your point about Marshalldom, there's been a revival of these old valve state amps. People seem to love them, and they're actually really great. It's a it's got a tube in the preamp, at least one 12X7, maybe more, but it's a solid state power amp. And at the time, people were like, "Oh, yuck." Well, since then, most of the power amps that people use these days are there were many of them are Class D when they're using an external power amp, because they found that tube power amps were stupidly heavy and really expensive to retube, and the tubes would go out. It happens. So, if you think about, I've got pretty much every iteration of the Seymour Duncan power stage power amps. And by the way, those are great. That right there, 700 watts a side. If 350 watts per side. If 700 watts isn't going to get it done for you, you have worse problems than I do. But the point being is talking about that particular rig. I still have all the components for that rig, but kind of the nuance around putting these things together is something that's near and dear to my heart. So getting back to your question, I would say that and again, hold on, you probably answer me. Is it the purple? So Ruby Tubes is a great place to go. JJ's too. There is a whole world of kind of how hot or how cool do you go with the tubes. That is to say, the hotter the tube, the more gainier it's going to be. The cooler, the less gain. Generally, kind of somewhere right in the middle. Probably a great place to start. The other thing is you might jump onto the Marshall forum, and it just in case you haven't been anybody else here, just for pisses and giggles. When you jump into a forum, the newbie thing to do is just to post your question and kind of hope somebody's going to reply quickly, because usually there's a sense of urgency. However, forum etiquette is you go in and search for posts around that topic and see what people have said already. And usually you'll get, quote unquote, flamed if you kind of are the newbie that shows up like, hey, I have this question that's been asked about 5 million times. There's all these long threads, but I didn't bother to kind of, test the waters, take the temperature of the room. So that is to say, the Marshall Forum would be a great place to go. And you might, and again, just if you don't see any posts on it, suggestions for 6100. Now be prepared. This person's going to say, oh, you got to get this. And this person's going to say, you got to get that. Try and, again, take the temperature of what kind of seems to be the common denominator, and, without going out and buying, expensive old vintage tubes. As I discovered, kind of these are just kind of the latest and greatest Mesa Boogie tubes. I stuck them in there, and it's like, sounds like the amp, feels like the amp. So that would be my advice, and feel free to investigate further. I love it. I take it you're talking about the cat piss. The other song, right. There we go. Come on. There we go. Oh my word. There we go. Okay. So I answered the two part. My new kitten has incrementally changed enough settings in my modeler and system setup that now I literally have to redo everything. Everything is off. There's track noise, etc. Gotta love them. Oh my word. That's hilarious. Blackwater. What did I do? Blackwater. I don't know what I did. Griffin was there. I was thinking about that, of course. I was actually thinking about that yesterday, and I was like, yeah, Griffin was there. So, which is great. And I think Kiara was there as well. It's not Tiara, it's Kiara, right? What a lovely name. All right. Rabbit Trail question. Oh, my favorite. They offer IRs with speaker only and the amp cab speaker. Do I have a preference? Okay, yes, purple. Number 67 of the first 100. Yes. Oh, right. Thank you, yeah. Blackwater. That, it's kind of, yeah, where they kind of go into the breakdown. Yes, thank you. I don't want to get flagged by searching for it, but yes, they do this great little vocal thing, and with the acoustic guitars, it's just like, and those moments when you have the opportunity within the framework of an arrangement This is going to be a really crappy version of this. No, it's not there. Hang on. I sent this. I've got a show on the 17th here in the Bay Area. I'm going to be doing a short set, but I'm really excited to be getting a chance to get out and play a couple of these songs. It's literally going to be a couple of songs. But I sent my buddy Danny Jones. So this is a little micro intro that one of the things that's great about sitting with a song... how's that going on? There it is. All right, there it is. Sorry, it took me a minute. So sorry, I'm a little out of tune. So it's been a minute. It's been a year since I played that little thing, but it's an intro for this song. That's one of my favorite songs from the instrumental album. It's called "The Pink Sky," and I think we would have played that. In fact, I'm nearly positive we played that at that little run of shows. But it's got the. Oh, sorry. Sorry, it's got to have a. It's got the time and got to have the feel. So, and what ended up happening is a keyboard part. That basically I isolated and looped the keyboard part. Let me get back to the set right. So. And so these little moments where you can kind of just, if you will, take your hat off and just kind of rest it on the hook before you go into the song, if there's kind of creating an atmosphere. And one of the things that I'm very conscious of, if you think about, boogie players historically, there were these moments, where they leverage the sound of the amplifier, wrong reverb for that, by the way, and the vibe to kind of create an atmosphere, and it draws the listener into this thing in theory, and creates an atmosphere. And so one of the great things about studying with guys like Christian Cola, and listening to all the music that I'm collecting, these little tidbits, is I'm always kind of going, oh, they did a little breakdown thing. There's a Bonnie Raitt song called Cold. I think it's called Cold. Bonnie, what are you called? What are you called? Cold. Oh heck, I'm gonna be naughty. I'm gonna get a claim and not a strike, but this isn't gonna be monetized anyway. I'm gonna play you the breakdown because it's flipping great.
Don't you see? Coming down, don't even touch the ground. Cold, don't be cold.
Well, that was worth the claim because the stream really isn't monetized anyway. So the point being is that little breakdown there, just like I heard that, I was like, and this is a great thing about there is a whole world of AI bringing in what's happening around us. So that is a curated playlist when you go out. Apple Music, play such and such, and all of a sudden it starts playing all this stuff. It's one of my favorite things that's happening is I get introduced to pieces of music that I never would have. I don't think I'd heard that song before. I was driving up to Mesa Boogie to drop off an amp, a couple of amps actually, and that came up and I heard that breakdown. I was like, oh, I'm so doing that. So there's a breakdown kind of vibe, not dissimilar to that's going to be in one of the demos for this amp, and it's just like it's going to be something that will be a thing. That. So the point being is that what I love about being inspired by a piece of music is that it wakes something up in me that was kind of like, music is something that you feel, right? And so the great thing about falling in love with a piece of music or a passage in a song, there's a kind of a little group of cells in your body that kind of wake up and go, I've been waiting to hear that. You just didn't know it. And when you do, you kind of go, oh, and it activates something in your creativity. So that's one of the reasons that I've been, first of all, if you don't have Shazam on your phone, strongly suggest getting it because, the number of times I'm someplace I'm like, oh, I love that. And I add it to my quote unquote DD Jams playlist. And then if it's something heavy, it gets added to the Rectifier playlist, So there's specific things that I've got that when I need to get into a particular creative space where I'm gently harvesting ideas that I've heard. That's a fishing pole, by the way. It allows me to be able to do that. But most importantly, Bonnie Raitt wasn't the first person to do a kind of a cool blues breakdown. But when I heard that, I'm like, oh, and it kind of, with my inner. It allows me to. Oh, sorry, C instead of a B instead of not C. So much for the playing it right the first time club. But the point being is that I love being pulled into something that inspires me. All right, let me get back to this. Oh, so in other words, the track didn't play. Gosh darn it. Okay. We all met Jamie, didn't we? Hold on a second. I've missed a couple of people here. I really hope that everything was passing through in the midst of all that. There's been any of you that think about streaming and are on a Mac, there is an application if you're using Universal Audio stuff that's called Console. And it's basically like a mixing console. The problem with Console is if you're using effects in Console on the aux bus, they leak around the normal routing of audio and are impossible to control. So this morning I kind of went, hey, I'll just use some reverb on the amp. But there's still some back routing that's entirely possible that the pass-through audio on that track wasn't there. So if that's the case, I apologize. I usually try and fix that. Yes, we are back in Antlers. Kiara, that's right. What a lovely name. That's right. Okay, good. Steve, what's happening, my man? Great to see you. Hello. Bass playing guitar players in the house. Come on. Tony, what's going on, my man? Great to see you as always. Now I can hear my guitar again. Great. Thank you for the heads up. There's some testing that needs to be done. Okay, good. There we go. Okay, good. Kick. Yeah. Of note, I'll keep them. I'm also going to start streaming to Instagram. And there's a guy that is my his name's Cam. He's actually the Gibbs Sunday guy, who's my social media tutor. And by the way, he has his course. If anybody's seriously interested in upping their game, go to it. So, what's going on, Rick? Great to see you, my man. Hello. Welcome. Excellent. It's an interesting thing. I wanna encourage you to move out of E and A this week. One of the things that happened in a demo that I did probably a year or so ago, I just kind of picked up. I think it was the Pink Strat, and I just kind of went, I'm going to go to C sharp minor. And that's. So, C sharp minor, relative minor of E major, it just sets itself up for a lot of really cool things. You got to watch out for that open G string, because that G sharp, if you play in E, and let's just say we're saying some sort of E pentatonic E, you got the G natural in there. If you're playing an A, I'm going to say some sort of pentatonic key. You got the G natural in there. If you're in C sharp minor, there's that G sharp, not to be confused with a G. So you got to watch out for that. So it's a thing. Okay. What's going on, Sonny? Hello, hello, hello. Good morning to you, my friend. I play, there we go. Okay, I play jams, mostly in C and D, for my vocal range. Now, that is very un-guitar player-like of you and very musician-like. That's a really smart thing. I would encourage you to take a look at F and G and see if you can't find a way in those keys to sing around your vocal range, but because they're kind of a fifth away, you're going to be able to. I should say they're up a fourth, but I was thinking down a fifth. It's going to give you maybe the ability you can find some of those vocal notes there as well, but you're going to be singing in a different. Let's just say I'm in C. I'd say I'm gonna do some sort of C minor-y thing after I tune, and the traditional thing that we would do but let's just say we're in instead of C, we're gonna go down to G minor. We would kind of normally follow the route like that. But what if we hang out at... So let me set up the chord progression. So you're still kind of... You're still kind of will have a tendency to resolve to the G's, but... Give it a shot. You might find yourself writing some different melodies, but I love that. Kevin, what's going on, my man? You were my hero, and thanks so much. Gosh darn it, Saturdays are a lot of fun. All right. First of all, does anybody have any questions about anything? And I will say that one of the things that I am kind of actively working on is this whole 15-minute fundamentals course. So I would love it, first of all, a little bit earlier, now we're kind of back in guitar talk, if you will, and not so much the gear talk. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier, the idea of kind of trying to juggle the different things that you play, like, oh, I got to work on my arpeggios, or I got to work on my single string stuff, or I've got to work on this. Kind of the ability to toggle between those different things can be a challenge. There's one there, and the funny thing is that, I did this the other day. All right, I'm going to be... Give me a moment. Let me head off screen here for a second. I'll be back in a hot sec. Hang on a second. Grab you. Grab you. Grab you. So this is a guitar that has not gotten a lot of love around here. Other than I pass it as it sits over there kind of going, when are you going to pick me up again? So, gosh darn it. It's an interesting thing when you think of a Les Paul. You don't normally think of a double cut, and that little sucker out of tune. But I just kind of in the midst of having a cat piss moment, and by the way, if anybody here missed the whole cat piss thing, oh, just the whole thing's out of tune, was this kind of this tone where you kind of, it's like smelling cat piss, you kind of go, oh, every time you play. And it's been something that I've been kind of, it's been in my head, but I haven't quite got there until I kind of really started playing through this. Not that, and the great thing is I can find it in all the different rectifiers once I knew how to find it. But this guitar in particular, is going to be a really cat pissy guitar. Out of tune again. All right. So in any case, the point being is that there's a Les Paul for you. How about that? It's a really interesting guitar. So the short story about all of this is there's an amp here that is a V4, like Steve Morse used to play with the Dregs back in the day. And it's a great rock and roll amp. The Aerosmith guys were using modified V4s that were in the studio when they recorded the Rocks album. It's a great sounding amp. Stones have used them. So when I went and bought that amp, the guy had a kind of a double cut guitar without the kind of the flame top. This is one of the prettiest guitars I've kind of got. And I usually don't buy based on like, oh, it's a gorgeous guitar. It's usually kind of, that's a secondary thing in theory, except for the fact that, like the pink Strat, sometimes you kind of go, you see, there's a color that you fall in love with. And fortunately, those guitars happen to be really great sounding instruments. So that was the case with this one. But the interesting thing about this guitar, I think I got it from a guy on Reverb, but he delivered it locally. And the thing is that it's really kind of unplayed. So there's a thing that happens with an instrument. You can feel the frets, especially at the top of it. An unplayed guitar, kind of like that new car smell. A car that's been lived in and it doesn't smell like the new car smell, and there's something kind of ever so slightly sterile about an unplayed guitar. It just hasn't been played in yet. And this guitar still got that, but I can tell the essence of this instrument. It's going to be a really... And honestly, I kind of had to grow into being able to play this guitar the way it... Because it's got a particular vibe that kind of, now that I figured out what to do with it, is going to be really cool. In any case, you said Les Paul, we can do that. Double cuts are nice. They play... and the funny thing is, it's really interesting because it's a Les Paul, but it's not. And I don't quite... the funny thing is that I play lots of Gibsons, so each one of these, you kind of sit down with it. And it's a funny thing I'm going to say, but you have this kind of unconscious relationship with the instrument. That is to say, the weight of the different instruments, how neck heavy or light is it, kind of has to do with kind of how much you're going to maybe counterbalance it with this leg here, kind of how hard you maybe do or don't need to grip as it comes in here, and all these things that kind of are happening without actively thinking about it. The neck on this is classically Les Paul. This is kind of, it's just a little bit bigger than the 1960s smaller neck, which is actually a neck shape, that I really like because in terms of the Hendrix kind of. over the top of the neck. The other thing that's really different about this guitar is it's got, just a single volume and tone. So if you need to get a little smoky. And for when I had the tone all the way up with this particular sound, it was just too. It was picking up too much of the brassiness, even though this is a glass slide. So there's a sound on this, so the thing is that there's a certain amount that you just got to play the guitar, and the vibrations permeate through the instrument, and the instrument begins to open up. There's also a certain amount that the frets just feel new. So this guitar is for all intents and purposes, new. I think it's about 10 years old, but it's going to be. I think it's going to become an important instrument for me, which I'm really excited about. It's certainly gorgeous. This is also I'm a DiMarzio pickup endorser. However, my buddies over at Solo Dallas sent me these pickups, and this is a funny thing. Any of us who are old enough to know what T-tops are, at the beginning of the replacement pickup moment where everybody was like, oh, DiMarzios and Duncans, you gotta have them. T-tops were the bane of existence. People couldn't get them out of their guitars. They're now going for $400 and up on Reverb. People have completely lost their minds about T-tops. And, they're really just kind of the next thing that Gibson did after they went to just make it a little bit more modern than a PAF, just a little bit more to it. But people just hated them. And through, and part of it was the gear that was around at the time, the evolution of gear. There are a lot more choices, and the T-tops, in particular the neck, could be tubby or boaty. Nobody wants tubby or boaty. It's kind of like somebody was talking about, Albert was talking about fizz. That was the Christian Cola comment. Okay, got it. I remember now. Okay. All right. Let me get back in here just real quick before I go too far down the rabbit trail here. And thanks, Kevin. It's important for me to be reminded of this guitar, because this is the thing. I'm going to rabbit trail again. Here we go. The right guitar will change your playing and change your life. We wouldn't be here on a Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon, or for some of you Saturday evening, if we weren't deeply moved by what happens when we pick up this instrument, deeply moved by what happens when we go and see our favorite guitar players or our favorite musicians. Something it resonates with something that's really deep within. Can't necessarily explain why, but it's just kind of like it's just that way. So the thing about an instrument is that the each one of these guitars enables me to realize, if you could think of the different frequencies of, again, I talked about C sharp a minute ago. It sounds different than C. There's a tightness, not just that it's higher in pitch. There's a looseness. Literally, you've got a longer length of string, and I can actually hear and feel that. And so as an end result, that looseness of string, or the tension as you go further up the neck, really influences kind of the character. It's not just a pitch thing. You could take C sharp and digitally pitch it down to C, and take C and pitch it up to C sharp, and they would not sound the same, in my opinion. There's a thing that happens with the slack factor with the string. But the point being is that the difference of each one of these instruments is kind of like in each of those different keys, and it brings something uniquely out in you as a player. The right instruments do. And if there's an instrument you're like, it's just kind of not happening, get rid of it. If it really doesn't resonate with you, and this one, I've had this probably 5 years, really long time. And originally I had it set up for kind of a slide tuning. But then I went to pick it up the other day because I was like, I need to pick this guitar up. And there are a certain amount of these things, excuse me, that we don't necessarily know why. I just kind of went, I need to pick this guitar up now. And I was like, I hope I put it back in standard tuning, because it lived in kind of a slide dad-gaddy kind of thing, open G. I don't remember what it was. Maybe something for a couple of years, because it was like, I'm going to leave a guitar set up for slide tuning. That was the idea, and it lent itself to that. However, like, there's more to this guitar than that. And I went to pick it up, and I was like, oh, right. So there's a feeling that you can have about an instrument that you may not be ready to do what that guitar can do yet, but to grow into that and kind of go, I'm going to be able to. There's something that's going to happen to me through this instrument that I've got to keep it around for. And so literally, kind of the other day, it was last week, I kind of marched by it and I was like, I'm picking this thing up now. And so as an end result, you'll probably see me playing this guitar a lot more. And the funny thing is that traditionally, as a Gibson player, you can't really see it with the knobs back there, but that is kind of my main flying V there. We took the 4-knob Les Paul configuration and we kind of applied it to a flying V. It's not identical because there's a 5-way switch, but the concept is more or less the same. And the ability to have separate tones for each of kind of the extremes of the pickup selection is kind of one of the things that I really love about that setup. However, there is something kind of unique about just like working with a 2-control instrument that is unifying in a way that is just a little bit different. And my guess is that there's a little bit less stuff going on. Maybe affects the tone. You hear about people disconnecting the tone controls. I think that because there is less stuff in the circuit, it may sound a little different. But the other thing is that it means that the way I think about the instrument, when I'm thinking about a 4-knob Gibson, I'm thinking about it very differently than I think about this, and so it means that the great thing is there's just 2 things to mess with besides the pickup selector. Might actually not be a bad idea to get some sort of coil tap going on here. But the point being is that I want to encourage you, each one of your instruments, I know to a certain extent it's really easy to go, I remember playing that guy's double cut when I went and checked out the V4 and going, oh, you know what, they sound different. And I was like, I love that guitar. And so I was like, okay, that's kind of when I went out and searched for this. And I saw this one. I was like, okay, it's beautiful. And I think I played it before I actually bought it, but I'm not absolutely positive. I know the guy met me in the parking lot, and I don't think I had paid him the money yet, obviously, because he handed off the guitar. I wouldn't have paid him in advance. But I did play a little bit. I'm like, okay, there's a vibe. But I wasn't ready for this guitar, which is a really strange thing to say. I've been playing a long time, but I had to kind of grow into it. So don't be afraid to kind of have a guitar that's speaking to you, and just kind of get there. So the thing about this, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, Kevin, is I'm very thankfully I'm a Dunlop endorser, but as of late, I reached out to my handler there, and I was like, I need you to send me this giant list of strings. I was like, hope he's going to send them, and they all came, and so it allowed me to try and do different things. And what I mentioned a little earlier in the show is these are the Zakk Wylde 10 through 56 that are on. Let's see if I can get to it. There we go. Oh, got it. That V and its sister V. They're 2 identical guitars. And changing from the 10 through 52 to the 10 through 56 transformed the guitar. And I was just like, I can't believe there was a change in every element of the character of the instrument. There was a warmth and a body and I was just like, it's the same strings. I just went a little heavier from a 52 to a 56. That's not that big a jump, but everything about the guitar changed. I was like, okay, and it's kind of why I wanted to kind of go, let me get as many of the strings that I would want to try on the different instruments at different gauges and then try them. And in so doing, you then kind of go, okay, so implicitly, the majority of the strings that I use are Dunlop. They're heavy core. That's actually not what's on here. I actually looked the other day. These have got a set of Dunlop or Diodario, because I was a Diodario endorser previously, and so these will be coming off, and I'll be putting on the Dunlop. But they're heavy core. And the great thing about the heavy core strings, as the name implies, it's a heavier core. One, it means that they sound a little different. But the other thing is because it's a heavier core, if you hit the bass strings a little bit harder, they're not as inclined to go sharp. Which, part of the whole thing about the attack drives the front end of the amplifier and the power amp section for that matter. So the way you hit the strings is really an important dimension of all of this, that the string is hugely important. However, as much as they were kind of outlayer guitars, I know that and it says they're either 9 through 42 on the Stratoid guitars and 10 through 46 on the Gibson ones. That they're just kind of the perfect string, except for when I start ending up on these extended range instruments, or ones like that, that I've detuned, and then I was like, man, there's something here I've got to figure out that I haven't figured out yet. So, rabbit trailing. Okay, hang on a second. I bailed out of mine because that heel was in the way compared to most double cuts. Oh, interesting. First of all, hey Tom, great to see you. Saw your gig bag the other day. Thanks again. Or our gig bag. This one, the cut is actually the heel is actually pretty darn civilized. And I've there's a thing that I probably still do without. At the top of the neck, where I'll bring my thumb around. But this one, because of the cut there, I don't have to. But like on a Les Paul, that will happen like that. But here, I know it sounds kind of stupid, but I just realized I don't have to do that. Hence why it's a double cut, why they did that. I'm a little slow sometimes. Interesting. Sorry to hear it was a heel. Nitin, what's going on? How you doing? I want to know, Nitin, how many dishes are in the sink? 0 or a stack? Less PRS. My friends at Gibson would have a cow. That is hilarious. Double cut. Oh, that I'm not gonna take the bait. That's a 2014 Doug. Thank you. Like I said, I'm a little slow. C sharp has more feeling than standard C to me. It moves more fluidly. There's something really magic about it, and it's funny because you think, all right, we're already kind of past the 7th fret, right? If you will, there's the stuff that's down here, and then there's the stuff that's here. Now, not that you can't play C sharp, By the way, that's really pretty. First of all, in case I haven't mentioned this before, which I don't think I have, that C sharp there. Sorry, C sharp minor 7. It's one of the prettiest guitars as well as chords on the guitar. That major 13, that's just a major 13, no sharp 11, right? Sharp 11. Don't like that though. But they're so close together. You would think, C sharp, C. What's the big difference? But they are flipping different. Um, okay, there we go. Dunlop are the best. It's all that I play. One of the only strings I cannot break. They stay in tune. Picked up mine on Thursday. Oh, awesome! And you're out you're in Benicia, right? Or ish. So the thing is that I do break strings from time to time eventually because I'm pretty bend heavy, and depending on what's going on, I do play with enough. The thing about a 1 millimeter Tortex is there's enough banging away on the string that the strings do at the bridge. They do take a certain amount of beating. The Dunlops are really, really good about not breaking, and as you pointed out, they're really good at staying in tune. I have a pretty extensive kind of stretching thing that I do. Generally speaking, I'll probably do a video on this sooner than later about how I stretch my strings, and I do a pretty vigorous stretch, and I stretch them until they basically don't go out of tune anymore because, gosh darn it, I want to play the guitar and not have it go. And the guitars kind of go out of tune a little bit on their own anyway. So having a string that's continuing to stretch as I'm trying to make the rest of the guitar, deal with the things that once a string has kind of settled, that the guitar still isn't a perfect instrument. If you hit a string hard, even if you kind of keep the nut lubed or put a little graphite in there, whatever, and have it filed, there's a certain amount that the string sometimes jumps up and over the nut there and kind of just, it sits on one side or the other. And it's one of the reasons if you hit the strings really hard, you'll find that like sometimes it actually, rather than going flat, it actually goes sharp. And it's because the string is kind of, in its excitedness, has kind of jumped a little bit over the nut, if you will. And then the amount of string here is tensioned a little bit higher, which means the guitar is sharp. That definitely happens on bass. It's one of the reasons that I'm always very careful when I'm tuning a bass. I thought I was going to play bass today, but I didn't. I'm conscious of just kind of, the fact that you when you hit hard, it goes sharp, which is the strangest thing to kind of get used to. Chris, hey, have a great afternoon. Thanks for hanging out, my friend. And I'm sorry, your message came in the midst of daughter's senior prom. Oh, that's awesome. Have a lovely, lovely time. Senior prom. Wow, that's kind of special. All right, my man. Have a great time. Wish her my best. That's awesome. Okay, Brett. I have a hybrid 9246 set. Diodario sitting here for the 335. Changing them on my Strat today too. Vega Trem. I haven't tried the Vega Trem. I got to check that out. And then laugh out loud. This stack is building up. There we go. Definitely not in the washer yet. Please give Nandini our love. So Nitin is rolling solo. Actually, Melissa's doing an event. So amazingly enough, I actually usually I'll kind of let him. Melissa is out of town. She had an event yesterday and today, and so she stayed in the South Bay. So I was like, you know what? Rather than let them build up, I'm just going to kind of just get them into the sync. Those are jazz C chords. Actually bought a nice PRS SE McCarty, excuse me. $594 last week off Reverb, sweet resonant guitar, chunky neck, exactly what I was. Way to go! That's a funny Telecaster, Nitin. Awesome. I'm in Vallejo. 10 minutes from me. I had a chat with Mr. Jimmy. Their new signature, my new signature picks will be ready soon. Awesome. Way to go. I might put 498Ts in it eventually. Love their sound. All right. Well, first of all, I've covered all the things that I really wanted to cover today. I've got a lesson that actually starts in a half an hour, and I want to spend some time actually prepping for that lesson. So unless somebody has something hugely important, I'm going to plan on seeing you next Saturday, and I'm really excited. Today's a little bit of a shorter teaching day, so I get a chance to spend some more time in the afternoon working through some of the demo stuff on this lovely Rev E rectifier. David, what's going on? I got here late. Curious about Gensler pedal on your board. I like Gensler gear. Well, okay. On that note, have a great day. Okay. All right. So hang on a second. So give me a moment. Got to do something here. Okay. All right. Just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in. We can do this. All right. I need this base. And I need this cable. Okay, I got a chance to go into bass demo mode. All right. So first of all, any of you, and all of this would apply towards a guitar pedal board, but just for pisses and giggles, this is the brand new Mesa Boogie Subway Plus DI Preamp 2. Heretofore referred to as the Subway. So the thing is that generally speaking on a guitar pedal board, unless it's an acoustic guitar pedal board, so I am temporarily not doing my acoustic once a month gig. I'll probably pick up in the fall or sometime. But this board originally was my acoustic guitar pedal board, and then I kind of started going through. Actually, I've got a smaller board that's over there that I was using the little what is the Tonex plug? Literally that a battery, so I could just run it without a cable, and just kind of a cable and a little. And this box just in case I needed a ground lift on the way to kind of some sort of little kind of powered speaker type of a deal. So in those particular instances, in case, I'll bring two guitars with me. Acoustic guitars, you've got to have some sort of, volume pedal to mute when you're changing instruments. What's neat about this particular pedal that I really found that as I was changing instruments, and though you saw me just do this here, but the other thing is here I can do that, and then I can just go here and grab this. And gosh darn it, I found that in the midst of doing those demos, I really, really, really loved that feature. I was like, darn. It's because you think about, all right, it's a mute feature. It's like, but you do that about 5 or 10 times over the course of some demo stuff. All right, now I need to be conscious of all right, so I'm going to probably need to kind of toggle between having my mic. That was me saying muted but mouthing it, because I know this is going to probably sound like poopy through this mic. Maybe maybe I'm going to give it a shot. Let's give it a shot. No. I asked and you answered, so I'm down with that. The right Telecaster must be found. Okay, that's good. No, and the IR thing. No, that's good. Do me a favor. Put the IR question again. Put it back in there for me, Albert. Would you please? So all right. So the thing is that I can say this here. I couldn't really say it in the demo for this for reasons so the guy that designed this also designed this box. And his name is Alan. Andy Field, rather, not Alan. And so I had a chance to be on the phone with him for about an hour as I was kind of doing my research for the demo I did on this. This, again, is this Subway DI preamp, and it's flipping great. Arguably, the feature that I like the most, I'm gonna draw my pick. That is what's called a high-pass filter, and you'll hear me talking about this sort of stuff more. But basically, as the name implies, literally, the highs pass through. And so what's really neat is that as a bass player, this is my orientation. We've talked about this isosceles triangle between your left and your right speakers, and the idea is that it should be an equidistant point between the two speakers and the speakers and you, and that perfect triangle there. And the idea is when you're in that sweet spot, you're then in theory just kind of relaxing into the track, playing a little quieter. I need to turn down, that's what's going to help. I'm going to mute it. I'm back. All right, so that is with this guy off. So I reached out and I had a conversation with Andy. I was like, hey, what drive pedal would you suggest using with the Subway? And he's like, I've got just a pedal for you. So he kindly sent this down. So this is, excuse me, the Gensler 4 on the floor, and it's their drive pedal. And basically, what I used this for, hang on a second. It's funny, Brett was talking about kind of like his cat went in and messed with his levels. I am a bit of a creature of habit, and as much as I documented everything else, I did not document where the settings were for this guy. So if I am at all prone to start messing with stuff, then so be it. But basically, there is a song that is going to be on one of these, or a composition that's going to be on one of these Mesa Boogie things. It's actually going to be on not a dual rec. It's going to be on a triple rec one. And I was playing this kind of a heavier thing on this particular bass, which is kind of it's got a really nice natural sound. I'm going to mute my mic for a second. It's pretty even across all the different strings. Some basses, when you go down to the low B string from the E, or more importantly, when you go from the E to the A, which is a lot of the case with Fender style basses, all of a sudden the character of the instrument is very different. That is to say, this C and that C, although they're a little different, and I'm a little out of tune, they're relatively consistent. I gotta get my tuner off that headstock. Excuse me for just a moment. Stay. Back in a sec. Okay. So, one of the things that, when I put together a bass pedal board, so as I alluded to, and I'm always really sensitive. First of all, there are a lot of people that just aren't down with church, and or there are people who've had a bad experience at church. So I'm always really sensitive about kind of how I frame, kind of that I play bass at my church, probably about once a month. So I usually in a gear demo will refer to it as, on Sunday morning. That's kind of my code, because you know what, especially when I'm quote unquote doing so. So this video for this was a collab with the folks at Mesa Boogie. When I'm kind of speaking in conjunction with the brand, I'm very sensitive about the fact that, like, we live in a time where people who play their instruments sometimes are more vocal about the things that they feel about when they're not playing. I'm personally of the belief that, like, generally, if people want to hear me talk, they probably want to hear me talk about guitars and basses and gear. Not Sunday morning, and I'm okay with that. So, but I can still say Sunday morning, and everybody that goes to church knows exactly what I'm talking about. All right. So the point being, though, is that, I love having a bass pedal board, and I love playing on Sunday morning because bass is one of my favorite instruments. It's this foundational part of the music where, and we've talked about this thing, and I'm going to get to this in just a moment, but the preamble is really important. And thanks for asking, by the way. The left hand of the piano, the right hand of the piano, I liken the left hand to the horse, and the right hand is the saddle, and then the guitar player sits in the saddle. And so that is to say, when I'm kind of going, I'm outlining the bass note, left hand. the right hand's chords are following what's happening there. And if you're a keyboardist, as the bass note is changing from note to note, you'll potentially play inversions where guitar players will kind of ride along, moving with each chord up and down the neck or from string to string. And in turn, the melody notes are based around those chord tones, as well as kind of the filler notes in between, creating tension. That is, say, tension. And resolution. That chord right there, that's a 7sus4. You could end there, but especially if I set you up, you're like, please go to the 3. So the point being is that the working with the instrument helps you find that spot. The pedal board allows me to fine tune where the instrument is sitting. I like having a compressor. I like having a drive pedal when I need to. And there will be times I'll use compressor end. So somebody asked a very important thing. It's actually a conversation I had with Andy. Drive or compressor first. And we both kind of came to the conclusion, and it's different for different people, but ideally I want to be able to compress my drive pedal as opposed to drive my compressed pedal. So that's kind of the way I set this up. So generally when I'm playing with the drive pedal, mute. That in and itself is not the world's quote-unquote sexiest tone, but it was specifically designed in the framework of the track that I was working on that would sit in a particular place. In particular, kind of there's a new take on quote-unquote nu metal. And the snare drum is tuned low, so the bass kind of has to work around the snare drum and where the kick drums sit, and sit in this particular place where it's also supporting where the dual recs are going to sit, where they're the brighter part of the equation. And in terms of this road, the left hand, the bass sits in a particular place. The guitars, harmonically, chords and melody, they sit on top, and collectively they kind of do this little kind of strange little handshake like that. So having the right bed rock tone got a little bit of rumble on it. Now there are these different drives. I did not read the manual on this. I just kind of plugged in. That's a nice set. Hang on, muting. So what this little guy here, the drive select, is allowing me to kind of, if you listen to the character, it's got a, well, listen for the fizz factor. Albert was talking about fizziness a little bit earlier. In this particular case, I want a little bit of zing in there, just a little tiny bit of. For their own purposes, I love all of them. But if you listen to what was happening in the top end, it's creating this little bit of, well, let's not call it fizz, let's call it sizzle. And all of which flipping sounded great. And again, I'm not, when I think about bass, I think about it contextually, because most of the time you think about bass, the bass player is hardly ever playing on their own. So that foundation of being able to use this together. Now, one of the things that I started to talk about but didn't get to was that rumble. This is kind of one of my favorite things I've been able to kind of demonstrate. Usually you kind of, there's a feature like, how do I demonstrate this in a way that's really clear? So this is a high pass filter. As I engage it like that, it's rolling out the low end. And so what it's rolling out is I hit the strings here. You heard it before, but there's a rumble, and I'll mute the strings or mute the mic while I do that. Now that doesn't mean I don't have low end. It's just rolling out this subharmonic noise that's there. And I started to talk about this, and I apologize, jumping around a little bit, that when you're sitting there in that isosceles triangle trying to get into the groove in your space, when you've got all this extra fudge happening around this, the string, that kind of subharmonic content that, as Andy pointed out, is atonal, you start to tighten up because you're trying not to hit the string in such a way that in the midst of kind of, you get that stuff going on there. Let me turn the drive off for a second. So with that type of fingered thing, that extra noise in the bottom, I start to tense up because this is hanging out in the background, and my monitors are relatively quiet to the level that I normally play at. So if I bring it up, you begin to really notice this in the background versus that. And again, this and that. So I'm going to play a couple of notes with the and the character of the bass doesn't really change that much. And you also have the ability to bring up the bass control itself here, or if you want to, you can add the deep switch is in. I'm going to pull it out. So the idea is the balance of all of that. All right, so getting back to this pedal here. So there's an input sensitivity control there as well. And I apologize. I didn't read the manual. I just plugged in and was like, let me set up a tone. I was like, oh, I love this. And so my take on it is that this is for active instruments, and that's for passive instruments. It has basically, what I really like about it is it's got a high pass and a low pass filter if you want to use it there. Since I was running that into here, I opted to do all the filtering here. So you got your drive volume, which basically means that for those of you that don't speak, and this is a little bit of a different approach. You can blend your clean volume and your drive volume. So let's get that setting. Say I want the clean sound. That's just the direct sound, if you will. So here how much I'm blending in. So on its own, a little bit of gain, but here it's just adding. It's adding just a little bit of hair that you don't really notice. And hold on, let me lose. And I don't think I'm clipping. Hang on just a sec. Apologies. Hang on a second. I said I'm clipping. My apologies. Give me a moment. No longer clipping. My apologies. Let me try that same Same thing again. So here is pedal off, pedal on. Now let me bring the volume levels to the point where they match. So there's just the clean. How about turning the pedal on more on? Here's just the clean. And a little drive. So what's neat about that is unlike your traditional average drive or distortion pedal, you're able to blend in the drive signals separately from the amount of clean volume, which in terms of a really smart design, it's a really smart design. Let me get back into the comments. Oh man, okay, hang on a second. Okay, that bass sounds great. I just use a P bass in the studio. It always sounds right, in my opinion. So all right, hang on a second. Here we go. Again, all it takes, so Brett, just imagine that, you and your P bass, and there's maybe a jazz bass that you kind of live with. First of all, every time I did this, the level is a little lower on this instrument, so let me, right, oh, this is one of the other things that I'm not doing it rightish. One of the other things about this pedal, let me go ahead and gain myself back up again. You can use the boost function on here, such that when you switch from an active bass without the boost to a passive bass with the boost, you can just kind of level match them. And I love a P bass. Now let me switch over to the jazz. Ooh, I've got 6 minutes until lesson time. So this was kind of one of the fun little So what's really neat about this particular instrument, this is one of the ones that Andy was saying, if you're playing with flats, which is what are on here, flat wounds, that is. Add on that bright switch, and you get that extra attack there. Oh, come on. Let me see if I can take that off the edge of the necking. So this bass is a very, it's got not a super wide tone, but it's got a, pretty sound to it. So it's going to be out in the room. So per your comment, Brett, there are 3 basses that are going to be living in the room pretty actively, so to speak. And this one, you really hear the fingers, especially with the bright switch engaged. So, and I also know for blues, without the reverb. Really neat sounding preamp. I'm just super happy with that. Add a little compressor. That's off. It's on. It just gives it a little bit more definition. I'm going to do the same thing with the mic on. little bit more of the articulation. Here's just a little tiny, nice little sizzle on the top end. All right. Yes. Okay, hang on a second. Awesome. All right, thanks, Brett. Awesome, awesome, awesome. With pleasure. And David, thank you for asking. The funny thing is, I kind of in the back of my mind, I was like, I hope somebody asks about bass. But like, since we didn't get there, I was like, okay. But this was literally sitting there waiting for you. So thank you. That was kind of fun. And gosh darn it, thanks to you, I kind of, so I'm a set it and forget it kind of guy. And let me get to Albert here real quick. Do me a favor. Okay. Rapporteur question. They offer IRs with okay. Okay. I'm a set it and forget it kind of guy. But thanks to you, I was like, holy cow, there's some other sounds here that I might have just kind of turned it on and go, oh, there's a sound I'm just going to play. And I'll find it with the pick, right? Okay. So there are, in the world of IRs, there is the idea of, I just want it to sound as close to the speaker sounds in the room as it does. Then there's the idea of a produced IR. That is to say, it's the entire signal chain. We've added some EQ. We've maybe added a little bit of compression. And all of this stuff is happening to make the sound of it sound a little bit more produced. Such that way when you drop that cabinet into a track, it's mix ready. So, for example, for those of us that live with kind of digital drum programs, one of the trains of thought is like just creating a mix ready sound. Such as you add bass and guitars, you don't really have to do much to the drums because they kind of have already been EQ'd and compressed, and they kind of sit where they need to sit. Like I sometimes like to say, bring in the hips a little bit, just make it sit in that right spot. However, the challenge with these produced things is that somebody somewhere is making a decision based on their room, their ears, their cabinet, their amp. Even though the IR is just a cabinet, still we set things up and place the mics based around our preferences. Those preferences downhill have a huge impact on all those different things. So, the answer to that is, I don't care. I want to plug in an IR and go, feels great, sounds great. And that the end result is I gravitate towards certain IRs that I like. And just in the same way, when I was kind of going between these different drive select modes, I found that like, oh, that jumps out. And it's an interesting thing. I could do a similar thing, and arguably should do, as I walk through the different settings on Capco and IR. I've got some York audio. That's Justin York. Oh, I got to go a minute ago, so let me do this as quickly as I can. He was one of the touring guitar players with Paramore. Brilliant guitar player. He's got great IRs. He's got great ears. And his IRs have a very natural sound. I don't think they sound overly produced. And as I kind of go back and forth between those and the stock boogie ones, you can feel and hear the nuance of the difference of approach between their approach to getting the vibe that they were going for. And sometimes I like the differences in approach as I'm going for differences in sound that I'm trying to get an enunciation with the demo. And, so then there's all this other stuff is that you're still going to be hearing the sound of the microphone. The idea is how much of the preamp is coloring things and how much isn't. Short version, there's a Millennia Music and Media Systems preamp here. So I reached out to Joe Satriani better part of a decade ago. It's like, hey, I'm going to be doing some reamping. What preamp do you suggest? He suggested the Millennia stuff. I reached out to the Millennia guy. He sent down 2 different preamps. I bought this one. It's got 2 channels. And the reason Joe liked what they did, and I'm not saying that this is a Joe Satriani endorsement, I just asked him what he suggested, is it's totally transparent. Unlike the Neve 1073X or whatever it is, it's a dual kind of stereo unit. That's all about the color. So sometimes we want the color, sometimes we don't. especially if we know we want to add a little bit of EQ color, maybe in the mix, because we'll instantiate a 1073 plugin for that stuff. So that is to say, how many of those decisions are going to be made before or after? Same thing is actually true when it comes to captures of amps, even more so than of the IRs. All right, I hope that is a good enough description of that. Gentlemen and ladies, thank you so much. I've got a lesson I got to teach, or get to teach. Pleasure hanging out. And thank you, David, for the bass question. Gosh darn it. I learned something, which is, hopefully I do every one of these. But thanks so much. Have a great week. I look forward to seeing you next Saturday. Thanks so much. Bye for now.